Some people don't clean their home, they quiet a storm. It starts with something small. A cup left on the table. A shirt on the chair. But for you, it doesn't stay small. It grows, quietly, like a pressure in your chest you can't name. Until suddenly, the room feels heavier than it should. And you can't think. You can't rest. You can't breathe the same way. So you start cleaning. Not because you love it. Not really. But because it gives you something the world rarely does control. There's something deeply comforting about wiping a surface and watching it become clear. About taking chaos and reshaping it into order with your own hands. In a world that feels unpredictable, cleaning becomes a language your mind understands. A silent promise, at least this I can fix. But the truth is, this didn't begin in your adulthood. It usually starts much earlier, in homes where emotions were unpredictable, where silence meant tension, and noise meant something worse. In those environments, children learn something very quickly. They can't control how others feel, but they can control their surroundings. So they adjust. They tidy up, not just toys, but energy. They learn to read rooms like weather forecasts. They notice the smallest shifts, a sigh, a tone, a door closing a little too hard. And without realizing it, they begin to associate peace with order. A clean room becomes more than a clean room. It becomes safety. And over time, this turns into something deeper. Psychologists sometimes call it micro-control behaviors, small, repetitive actions we use to ground ourselves when everything else feels uncertain. Cleaning is one of the most socially acceptable forms of it. No one questions it. In fact, people praise it. You're so organized. You're so responsible. But they don't see what's underneath. They don't see the invisible tension you're trying to dissolve with every sweep of the floor. They don't feel the subtle anxiety that rises when things are out of place. They don't understand that sometimes, it's not about the mess, it's about what the mess represents. Because clutter, to you, isn't just physical. It's emotional noise. Every item left out is like an unfinished thought. Every disorganized corner whispers, something isn't right, Toss. And if you sit with it too long, it starts to feel overwhelming, like your inner world is slipping out of your grasp. So you clean. You clean when you're stressed. You clean when you're sad. You clean when something feels off but you can't explain why. And in those moments, cleaning becomes something almost meditative. Your mind slows down, your thoughts line up, your breathing steadies. It's one of the few times everything inside you feels aligned with something outside you. But here's the part most people don't talk about. Sometimes, this need for order isn't just about comfort, it's about avoidance. Because when your hands are busy, your mind doesn't have to sit with what hurts. When you're scrubbing the floor, you don't have to think about the conversation that's been replaying in your head. When you're reorganizing your room for the third time, you don't have to face the feeling you've been pushing away all day. Cleaning becomes a distraction dressed as productivity. And it's a powerful one. It gives you instant results, immediate relief, a sense of accomplishment that emotional work rarely provides. Because emotional healing is slow, invisible, messy in a way that can't be wiped away with a cloth. So your brain chooses the easier path. It says, let's fix something we can see, seen, and you listen, over and over again. Until one day, you realize something strange. The house is clean, but your mind isn't. The surfaces are spotless, but the feeling is still there, lingering quietly beneath everything you've arranged so perfectly. That's when it starts to feel confusing, because you've done everything right. You've created order. You've controlled what you can control. And yet, there's still this subtle restlessness, like something inside you hasn't been addressed. This is what psychologists often refer to as emotional displacement, when feelings that are too complex or overwhelming get redirected into actions that feel safer, more manageable. Cleaning isn't the problem. It's what it's replacing, because underneath the routine, underneath the need for order, there's often something much more fragile. A feeling of instability, a fear of things falling apart, or even a quiet belief that if you stop controlling everything, everything might collapse. And that belief doesn't come from nowhere. It's built slowly, through experiences where things did feel like they were falling apart. Where stability wasn't guaranteed. Where you had to become your own source of structure because no one else provided it consistently. So now, as an adult, your environment becomes your anchor, but anchors can become chains if you're not careful. Because what starts as a coping mechanism can slowly turn into a dependency. A silent rule your mind follows. I can only feel okay if everything around me is in order. 6. And that's a heavy rule to live by. Because life isn't always clean. It's unpredictable. It's messy. It interrupts your plans, moves things out of place, creates emotional clutter you can't organize into neat categories. And if your sense of peace depends entirely on external order, then every little disruption starts to feel bigger than it is. A small mess feels like a big problem. A slight disorder feels like internal chaos. And without realizing it, you start carrying the weight of maintaining perfection just to feel normal. But here's where things get even more subtle. Sometimes, people who love cleaning aren't just trying to control their environment. They're trying to earn their peace. As if calmness is something that has to be deserved. As if rest only comes after everything is perfectly in place. As if you're only allowed to relax once you've done enough, so you keep going. One more task, one more adjustment, one more fix. Not because it's necessary, but because stopping feels unfamiliar. And maybe even a little unsafe, because in the stillness, there's nothing left to distract you from yourself. And that's the part that feels the hardest to face. Because in the stillness, there's nothing left to distract you from yourself. And when that moment finally arrives, when the room is quiet, the surfaces are clean, and your hands have nothing left to fix, you're left standing in front of something much harder to organize. Your own thoughts. This is where many people instinctively reach for another task. Another drawer to sort, another corner to perfect. Not because it needs to be done, but because it delays the confrontation. But the longer this cycle continues, the more subtle its consequences become. You begin to feel restless in spaces that aren't yours. You notice imperfections others don't even register. You carry a quiet tension into environments you can't control, someone else's home, a shared workspace, even a moment that was supposed to be relaxing. And slowly, peace becomes conditional. It depends on things being just right. But life rarely asks for perfection. It asks for presence, and presence can't exist where control dominates everything. There's also a quieter cost. One that's easy to overlook. When you constantly fix the outside, you unintentionally teach yourself that the inside can wait. That your emotions are less urgent than your environment. That your discomfort should be managed, not understood. Over time, this creates a distance between you and yourself. You become incredibly good at maintaining order, but less familiar with what you actually feel. And that disconnection can feel like a strange kind of emptiness. Not loud or dramatic. Just a subtle sense that something important is being avoided. But here's the truth that changes everything. This behavior was never your weakness. It was your intelligence. Your mind found a way to survive uncertainty. It created structure where there was none. It built a sense of safety out of whatever was available. And cleaning, simple, repetitive, controllable, became one of the tools that helped you get through. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's something deeply admirable about it. But survival strategies are not meant to be permanent homes. At some point, they ask to be updated. Not abandoned, just softened. Because you don't need to earn your peace anymore. You don't need a perfectly arranged room to justify your rest. You don't need everything in place to allow yourself to breathe. Peace was never something you had to build from the outside in. It's something that slowly grows when you allow the inside to be seen. Even if it's messy, and this is where the shift begins. Not by forcing yourself to stop cleaning. Not by rejecting the part of you that finds comfort in order, but by gently expanding your definition of safety. Let the room be slightly imperfect and notice what rises within you. Not to fix it. Not to escape it. Just to witness it. That subtle discomfort. That urge to get up and do something. That's not danger. That's unprocessed emotion asking for attention. And the more you sit with it, without immediately turning it into action, the more something unexpected happens. It softens. Slowly, quietly, it loses its urgency. Because for the first time, you're not running from it. You're not covering it with productivity. You're allowing it to exist without trying to control it. This is emotional tolerance, and it's one of the most powerful forms of healing. You can also begin to ask yourself small, honest questions in those moments. Am I cleaning because it needs to be done? Or, because I don't want to feel something? Can I rest before everything is perfect? Can I allow this moment to be enough, even if the room isn't? These questions don't demand immediate answers. They simply open a door back to yourself. And the more often you walk through it, the less dependent you become on external order to feel internal calm. You start to realize that your worth was never tied to how well you maintain control. That your peace isn't something fragile that breaks the moment life becomes messy. It's something deeper, more stable, more forgiving, something that allows both order and chaos to exist without defining you. And slowly, cleaning becomes what it was always meant to be. Not an escape, not a requirement, but a choice. Something you do because you want to, not because you have to. Something that adds to your life, instead of holding it together. And in that shift, something inside you finally exhales, because you're no longer chasing a feeling through perfection. You're allowing it to find you in imperfection. So the next time you feel that familiar pull, the urge to fix, to organize, to control, pause for just a second longer than usual. Not to resist it, but to listen. Because beneath that urge, there's a quieter voice, one that isn't asking you to clean, but to feel. And maybe, just maybe, that's where the real peace has been waiting all along. If this felt like your story, like something you've been quietly carrying without words, then you're not alone.